Want to know what's inside Shadow under Hardflint Hall? Keep watching to find out. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is JVC Parry. I'm a freelance writer in the tabletop role-playing game industry, and this video is a little talk about what's inside an adventure of mine called Shadow under Hardflint Hall. So, what is Shadow under Hardflint Hall? This is a Tier 1 adventure for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, which takes characters from 1st to 5th level. It's fast-paced, filled with the 3 pillars of the game: combat, exploration and roleplay, and was written by myself and Patrick E. Pullen. This adventure has been written so that it's useful for both new and experienced DMs, but is really designed as an introductory adventure for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It's set in the threatened town of Sharpstone just after a devastating earthquake. The events that unfold take the characters from exploring the town to venturing further abroad and eventually returning to find that Sharpstone is threatened by an even greater foe. The book is filled with full-colour artwork and cartography featuring portraits of the most important NPCs and full-colour battle maps of all the important locations. The adventure was published through Kickstarter in May 2022 and is now available through my own web store as well as sites like DriveThruRPG. The adventure is around 40 pages long, featuring 5 chapters, cap-ended by an introduction and an appendix which contains all the important stat blocks for the adventure. Hopefully that's enough to whet your appetite for this adventure. However, I am going to continue now and talk in more detail about the narrative of this adventure. So, if you don't want to find out anymore, stop the video. The brief introduction to Shadow under Hardflint Hall tells us a little bit about what you can expect to occur during this adventure. It also introduces the Flint and Steel Tavern in the town of Sharpstone, where most of the adventure content takes place. As well as this, we get background information for the adventure, which helps to ground it a little in the world. Of course, this adventure is in a campaign-neutral setting, so it can be dropped into any ongoing game of your choice. In short, the adventure begins when an earthquake strikes the town of Sharpstone. This obviously causes a lot of problems throughout the town, which the characters are asked to tackle by Nodric Landstone, the tavern's owner and council member of Sharpstone. The characters also discover at this point from a group called the Ashen Rangers that Hardflint Hall up in the nearby mountains has been opened by the earthquake. Nodric wants the characters to visit there as he is ancestrally from that location. However, he suggests that they travel to the nearby town of Furford before they do so that they can gather supplies to help Sharpstone rebuild and repair. When the characters return from Furford, however, they find that Sharpstone has fallen into the clutches of an evil wizard named Cornelia Nostra. She wants the characters to enter Hardflint Hall too, in order to recover a magical staff that she desires from within the Dwarven Hall. Once the characters enter the hall, they find a little more about its dire past and its history, which reveals to them the presence of shadow creatures named Tenebrians who lurk in the very depths of the dwarven mines. Hopefully, the characters can fend off these creatures for long enough to recover the staff and take it back to Cornelia at Sharpstone. When they arrive though, they have to make a hard choice. Do they give the evil wizard what she wants, or do they stand and fight against her? The background of the adventure is detailed here in the introduction, but can also be found in The Fall of Hardflint Hall, a comic from Monolith Comics which accompanies the adventure. Chapter 1 begins with the earthquake which kicks off our adventure. This earthquake not only opens Hardflint Hall up in the mountains nearby, but it causes some serious problems for the town of Sharpstone. The characters are asked to tackle these problems, which vary from a warehouse catching fire, a creature escaping from one of the mausoleums, and a flock of bats harassing children in the town square. There are 5 of these tasks for the characters to undertake, and the adventure recommends that they tackle at least 3 of them. Each of these tasks contains a mixture of combat, exploration and roleplay that should help introduce players to the 3 pillars of D&D and get a grip on how D&D mechanics work. The tasks are also keyed to a map of Sharpstone by Saga Mackenzie, which accompanies the adventure. At the end of Chapter 1, the characters discover from the Ashen Rangers that Hardflint Hall has been opened nearby. Nodric Landstone, who has been helping the characters around town, asks them to investigate this newly opened hall because he knows something of the secrets within. However, before the characters can head to Hardflint Hall and discover for themselves what lies beneath the dwarven mines, Nodric asks them to travel to the nearby town of Furford to collect some essential supplies for Sharpstone's repair. This takes us to Chapter 2 of the adventure, in which the characters travel to Furford. They have a choice here of travelling over land or by river, each of which presents its own difficulties. But really, the focus of Chapter 2 is on roleplay. This section of the adventure is designed to help the players really inhabit their characters and come to terms with playing a role-playing game. When the characters eventually meet with the Dockmaster Hargreaves, they discover that these important supplies they're after have actually not arrived and have to go on a short side quest to recover them from the lair of giant spiders. Once the characters have tackled these overgrown arachnids, they're able to return to Sharpstone. However, on their way there is some foreshadowing as they notice gnolls running alongside the river or road, depending on how they choose to return. These gnolls will feature again later in the adventure. Chapter 3 of the adventure, Evil in Sharpstone, is a real twist in our narrative. When the characters return to Sharpstone, they discover that it has fallen into the hands of an evil wizard named Cornelia Nostra. Cornelia has used her band of gnolls to capture the townsfolk, including Nodric, and is holding them ransom against the characters. This is because Cornelia desires a magical staff from within Hardflint Hall, which she too has just learned of its opening. The characters have several options here. They might try to confront the gnolls, sneak past them, gain an audience with Cornelia, and each of their actions within this chapter has an impact on how they might interact with Cornelia if they do eventually meet. Of course, it's no mean feat to free the townsfolk from these gnolls, and Cornelia is a foe not to be messed with. The adventure assumes that eventually the characters end up meeting with Cornelia Nostra through one way or another. It's at this point that she presents her deal. She'll free the townsfolk if only the characters will recover the magical staff from Hardflint Hall. Should they choose to accept, the chapter concludes with a series of potential random encounters which might occur while the characters are travelling between Sharpstone and Hardflint Hall itself. Once the characters reach Hardflint Hall, Chapter 5 begins. Here the characters delve into this ancient dwarven dungeon, find out about its history and uncover magical artefacts from within. They learn of the Tenebrians, these dark shadow creatures who have emerged because the dwarves delved too deep and upset Mother Nature herself. Although they may seem undead or shadow-like, they are in fact elemental creatures who have come up from the very bowels of the earth to protect her. The characters also encounter the ghost of Tordrid Anvilarm. She was a dwarven warrior who gave her life fighting to protect the rest of the dwarves from the Tenebrians when they first attacked, and it's her story that can be found in the comic book The Fall of Hardflint Hall. Unfortunately, Tordrid's spirit is bound to this place for as long as the Tenebrians remain, and they show no signs of going anytime soon. Hopefully, the characters can find a way either to put Tordrid's spirit to rest, to banish the Tenebrians back down into the earth below, or solve this mystery in another way of their own creation. Eventually, after exploring Hardflint Hall, the characters should find the magical staff that Cornelia is after and be able to return it to her, which brings them to the final chapter, Chapter 5. In this final chapter of the adventure, the characters must decide how they approach Cornelia. Do they give over the staff to the evil wizard and release the townsfolk from her grasp? Do they try and fight her now that they have possession of the magical staff? All of these questions can only be answered by your players and their characters when you run Shadow under Hardflint Hall. Shadow under Hardflint Hall is available in PDF or print format, and because of certain stretch goals unlocked during the Kickstarter campaign, it also comes with postcards featuring the character artwork, a bookmark, and you can also grab a full colour A4 map of the town of Sharpstone. So that is what you can expect to find inside Shadow under Hardflint Hall. I hope you enjoyed this video and consider liking and subscribing to my channel. See you soon.